You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.
I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is The Coop. So today is Homegrown, and it's chapter 7, 8, and 9.
Yep.
So I am loving this book.
Yes.
I'm gaining a lot from it, and it's either confirming or challenging a number of my ideas and ideals. So
I agree.
Yeah. All right, first let's start with the scoop on the Coop. Jessie?
All right. Well, I have been organizing for our Coop group a mock election. So by the time this episode airs, it'll be a week until our current 2020 presidential election. So I thought it was the perfect opportunity to present our kids with some information on how an election works and give them the chance to do their own voting. So I have a whole blog post about it up on our website. So you can find the link on this podcast or go to thecoophomeschool.com.
So we're super excited for the election.
Oh, awesome.
I got the ballots in the mail.
Oh, yay!
I know. So, and I love that you addressed each one to each child.
Yes.
And then my husband and I both got our own. So tomorrow I'm going to continue reading What is the Presidential Election.
Perfect.
So we started reading that knowing you were doing this.
Yes.
So this will be really fun when I finish, hopefully, the book tomorrow.
Perfect.
And then we'll do our ballots.
Yay. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So I'm super stoked at all the thought and effort you put into this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's exciting.
And now it'll be ready for 4 years from now, too.
That's right. Then we'll be pros at what to do.
Yeah. So my scoop on the
Yes.
Coop is we had an awesome Alice in Wonderland Coop group book club on Wednesday.
Yes, we did.
So one of the things that probably took me the most time planning for was I got a porcelain teacup for everybody and cellophane wrapped each one. And since we had over 20 kids,
Yes.
that was that was like 2 hours of just cellophane wrapping. But I found them at a thrift store. They were $15 for a whole china set.
Wow.
And they had like 18 teacups and 6 coffee cups that look just like teacups.
Perfect.
So they got that, and the kids came in costume, and my son was a deck of cards. I had a Mad Hatter headband hat, and one daughter was a bunny, and then the other one was Alice.
Oh,
so
perfect.
yeah, it's just really fun to see everyone in their costumes, and kind of helps with the whole Halloween vibe, and getting to wear a costume in the month of October. So
Definitely.
that was really fun.
Yep, I agree. Blast.
A good reward for reading the book, right?
Yes. And lots of tasty treats there, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Eat Me cakes were so cute.
Yep, and we made little Madeleines and then decorated them like Cheshire cats.
Those were adorable. And then, so all of that awesomeness is going to be on a blog soon. So if you subscribe to our blog, you will get notified when that theme day, Alice in Wonderland, is posted.
Perfect, yeah.
So, yeah. All right, let's get to the book.
Yes.
Homegrown, chapter 7. Let's start with that. You want to go first?
Sure. So I felt like the theme of this one was kind of the value of time, and like how time is valuable, and having children choose what they do with their time is such a hard thing for us parents. We have to battle with ourselves on what's important, what's not important, and what to push and what not to push. And
yeah, I totally agree with that. I put figuring out between adult-led out-of-home activities versus self-directed free play in the home.
Yep.
But overarching is the value of time, definitely.
Yeah.
So that was just a more zoomed in on that. So I love that he started off with away from home activities.
Yeah.
And that he just called them away from home.
Right.
So these could be extracurriculars, they could be friend time, they could be field trips, they could be sports and skills they're developing. Right. He mentions Boy Scout or scouting.
Right.
It could be dance, music, all the things that all of our kids are taking part of. Those would be away from home activities.
Right.
And then, of course, in distinction from at-home activities, whatever they may be.
Right. I love that he referred to it as the culture of extracurriculars.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's such a culture of what are your kids doing? What are their activities? Like there's a value in how many or the quality or,
Right, yeah. And it's kind of like, since we all grew up in that culture, being Americans and just busy kids in general, there's kind of a letdown actually when you ask someone, so what are you doing besides school? And they're like, nothing. You're like, oh, I don't even know what to say. Like you're not busy every afternoon of the week and all weekends at a soccer tournament. Like, what do I talk about then? You know? So it's just a weird expectation that we have, but it's based on this culture that we've all grown up with and just it's just convention.
Right.
So, I love that he mentioned that it is a disruption to family life.
Yeah.
Whether it's a good disruption or not, that's for the family to determine.
Right.
But that it's a disruption. So it breaks into the rhythm and the melody of the family and the home.
Yeah. And I think he puts in here, you know, his wife would ask him, should we be doing more? You know, and that comes up in our household too. You know, like, should we be putting them in more things or try more things? And then on the other side of that, are we doing too much?
Right.
You know,
well, I had
a balance.
Yeah. I had FOMO the other day because I grew up a swimmer year round.
Right.
By the time I was 13, I was doing 11 practices a week, right? And then all week, if I didn't have Saturday morning practice, it was all day Saturday, all day Sunday as well. And then sometimes we missed school because it'd be a travel meet. So I ran into a friend whose daughter is now in swimming.
Okay.
And she is swimming every night from 6 to 7, and that's just 1 hour. Yeah. And they homeschool, so they have the whole day to be together. And 1 hour away, no big deal, right? But like for me, I felt FOMO, like, oh, what team is it called? And oh, okay, who would be interested in doing that? Like, and I come home and I'm talking to the spouse, and I'm like, I feel like our kids should be in swimming now, you know, like, and he was like, I thought that's what you had decided against for our family life. Like, you didn't want that kind of commitment. Right. And I was like, okay, that's true. And to each his own, you know, I commit in so many other ways. And I think that's why I couldn't commit to a daily, because I have so many other things I commit to. And what was cool is this mom, I was trying to get her to do lacrosse. I have her daughter do lacrosse with my daughter, and she was like, we're already at our max for sports. So she knew her boundary. Right. So I thought that was a really cool decision of hers, you know, even though their Saturdays are free. Sure. They're busy all the other days. Right.
That's a limit.
Right. So it's just hard in this culture. There's the FOMO aspect of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. We've definitely had to make boundaries, and then as things present themselves, we've discussed with our child, you know, and Ben talks about that in the book as well, as being able to sit down with your child and say, okay, if you want to do this activity, we can talk about it. But here's what your time looks like. You know, you don't have infinite time. Right. So this would be sacrificing the time that you might want here, or that you might be doing this thing, or spending time with this person. Is that worth it to you? Is this activity valuable enough that you're willing to sacrifice that time? And I mean, I've had my daughter say no to a lot of things on her own, you know, and I worked really hard to come to the discussion with a neutral point of view.
That is hard.
Not with a bias of my own, like I want to dissuade her from doing it. Right. But it's hard to come into it in a neutral position. But the only one, she has one activity that she's been pretty constant about, and that's the horseback riding.
Oh, she still wants to do that.
And that's my own dragging my feet, because I have my own boundaries and then comfort levels with the type of activities too. Oh, right. Like that's its own unique aspect too, is horseback riding lessons is completely foreign to me. Right. Horse care is foreign. It's kind of scary and intimidating to me. And so it's just something, it's not as natural, you know, calling up a dance studio and you know, getting information and sticking my kid in there is no problem.
Right. You just have some extra barriers there. And maybe when we go for our coop group, that will help her to see if she does want to continue it. Exactly. And then we'll take away some of those barriers for you.
I'm pretty sure she will. That's like unwavering for 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So it's my fault. This is one of those.
Well, maybe we can do it with you.
This is one of those, you know, I'm not honoring her choice here. And that's because I feel like she doesn't want to sacrifice something else. And I haven't decided that it's okay to sacrifice whatever the time is, because I feel like it's pulling from our time to be able to do it. Right. You know, I'm not making her give up something else.
Well, because you're also working. Right. Yeah. So what you're talking about is opportunity cost. Exactly. Right. And he kind of walks us through a conversation he had with his son about that. And when his son really wanted to do Little League, really Little League baseball, he said, okay, well, just so you know, that is less time for hunting squirrels and building teepees or whatever he does. And then the son was like, oh, well, then never mind. And I mean, just something as simple as candy with my kids. My kids know at night they were going to get, let's say, a cookie.
Yes.
But then during the day, we're out with friends and they want ice cream. And then when they get ice cream, I didn't think to tell them you've already had your sugar for the day. And then later I'm like, they say, where's our cookie? And I'm like, oh no, you had ice cream today. And they said, well, you didn't tell us.
Right.
It's like, oh, so, you know, they don't realize there's an opportunity cost for every decision that they make. And it's nice when the kid gets to make it. And sometimes the parent does need to make it just because if it doesn't fit in and would take away from family time, then you do need to say no. Right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of bonuses to all the extracurriculars that we do have our kids in, right?
Exactly.
They develop skills. They might find their passion in life or their vocation in life. It forms the brain. It teaches them problem solving, how to deal with failure, how to deal with different types of leaders. Like all the different coaches I've had in my life, you know, really taught me how to stand up to authority.
Yeah.
When they weren't a good coach, taught me how to be committed to something, even when the boss or the leader or the coach isn't good to me, and to still strive to be the best I can be. So it still taught me a lot and actually gave me some grit.
Right.
So there's a lot of wins with extracurriculars, but then, like he was saying, there's a lot of cons as well. Time away from family, busyness, can't develop at-home interests as well. You're with your siblings less. We don't want our kids to become more peer-oriented. We want them to be sibling-oriented.
Sure.
And then their peers and their friends are, you know, second tier. Still important and valuable, and those relationships we really value. But of course, the sibling and developing that bond is more important in the time you spend just being at home, doing nothing, getting bored together, right? Creating together.
Yeah, and Ben ends up saying that the freedom to self-determine how to pass so much of their time has cultivated a certain sense of entitlement in his sons. And I thought that was so brilliant because it's true. You know, my daughter has a pretty good sense of, when I remind her of what she values her time for. You know, I remind her, you like to be able to pick what you do. You like to be able to be alone in your room sometimes or to do this. But when we make ourselves so busy saying yes to everything that comes our way, you don't get that time. You know, and she's fairly good at it. It just depends on what the temptation dangling in front of her is. But it's amazing how much they covet their time. Yeah. You know, and so it's important for them, and we have to help balance that for them.
Especially the more of an independent player they are. Yes. So, and he mentioned that in here, one of his sons is really into independent play, and my son's into independent play. So, you know, even if it's something really fun that we're going to go do, it's not a sport. It's not a skill. It's just like, let's go to Safari Park. Sometimes they'll say, no, I want to just stay home and play with my trains. And the COVID pandemic really actually helped for that. And we've talked about that, how it really lessened the amount of extracurriculars that we did because we were gone every day. And so when I did have time at home, finally I would be like, oh, no, I can't. We can't go do that because this is our one day to have 4 hours at home in a row, you know. So, and, you know, he talked about the stress involved with being out. And I thought about how even just going on a hike a week or two ago, we were having to get out by 8 a.m. And I'm busy getting ready in my bathroom. So what do I have to do when we're in a hurry to get out? I have to yell. Now, I'm not yelling angrily, but I'm still yelling like, get your water bottles. And then they're like, don't yell at us. And I'm like, well, you can't hear me, you know, and that busyness and that stress doesn't do anything for the family. Just to go on a hike, just to not be 5 minutes late on a hike, you know. So I think there's a lot of merit in what he's saying in just staying home.
Absolutely.
And letting all these wonderful experiences go.
Because there's things that pop up at home organically that you don't organize, that you don't sit down to intentionally do, that are just very valuable. And that kind of brings me to something he talks about here, which is he says, after all, who has time to just play anymore? So
Right.
the more busy we are, our free time even becomes structured because we want to make sure they're doing these things even when they're playing to hit these developmental milestones or whatever it is.
Right.
That even the free play becomes adult-led or adult-directed.
They become teachable moments.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but
instead of
sometimes-
just letting them
Yeah.
play and just being with them
Right.
when they want to play with you.
And he quotes again from Peter Gray in his book Free to Learn, and it made me think of this. So I wrote this down, and it's easy for parents to value what they consider to be educational experiences over free play, right? You know, we see the value in educational experiences, but we forget that free play can come up with its own,
Yeah.
you know, and then free play is so easily dismissed as not productive, even though it can provide some of the most valuable life lessons. Children have so much opportunity to develop social emotional learning experiences and competency during free play opportunities. And so I know, like, even our Coop group, we were struggling to figure out how much free time to give them.
Right.
Because there's natural struggles in a group setting.
Right.
You know, when you have kids who range in age from 3 to 11, you have a lot of opportunity for some kids to go in one direction, other kids to go somewhere else, and then some to feel kind of stuck in the middle and left behind. And then that creates this tension. But what that really is opportunity for these kids to learn. So yes, sometimes it involves us helping them, but even in those free play moments, that's such a valuable experience because isn't that what adult life is like?
Right,
Don't
totally.
you have to figure out for yourself where you're going to go and belong?
Yeah, I'm always navigating friendships. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like even just today, one of my daughters was on a phone call
Yes.
with a friend, and they decided to do a book club together.
Oh, cute.
They had run out of things to talk about, and then my Ruby goes, "Should we do a book club?" And so then she had my laptop, and she was looking through Amazon books, and the other friend said, "Why don't we do a Little House on the Prairie?"
Oh, cute.
And this is a friend that's 2 hours away from us.
Okay.
So this would be a great way for them to connect.
Yeah.
But they came up with that on their own. They know they
sweet.
both like reading.
Sure.
And that was something for them to connect on. And they've only seen each other maybe once or twice since COVID started.
Right.
So it's this is a really great way for them to have a weekly
That's so
discussion.
sweet. Yeah, that's awesome.
But only because they had free time to
Right.
talk with each other.
Right, because it got to a point where they didn't know what else to do. All their normal games or activities were spent.
Right. And we weren't, normally we're at Disneyland with these people
Sure.
or we're at SeaWorld.
Sure.
And so, but this was just a time to be.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, and sometimes like, I think they can help you too.
Sure.
So when you're at home, you can come up with projects. So I have some takeaways if you don't mind.
No,
if
go for it.
Okay, so there's this show called The Home Edit on
Yes.
Netflix, and it's about getting organized, or it's called
Yeah.
Get Organized, and it's the company called Home Edit. And I was thinking a play off that, Homeschool Edit.
Oh, cute.
So one thing we can do is we can declutter our curriculum.
Sure.
How much information do they really need to learn? And so I tend to have a whole bunch of things planned, and usually the charter school teacher we check in with, she's always like, "Wow, you just have so much planned." And it's like, "Oh, I know, it's so much." So editing out and just doing some major ideas would be something that I need to do.
Sure.
Right? So that would be part of the homeschool edit. Also, you can homeschool edit by knowing your values.
Yeah.
So for Ben in this book, his value was home projects
Yes.
and working with their hands, and so and freedom to explore. So those values came first, and then it's easier to edit out things like Little League,
Right.
Because they know their top 5 values, and we go over this in our Thrive seminar, how to thrive in homeschooling,
Yes.
which is something you can sign up for through our website, and we ask people to find their values, and we talk a lot about that, and so use that to edit. And then also, Ben talks about what are you letting influence you? And so if you're surrounded by people who have an overabundance of extracurriculars, you do start doubting yourself.
Right. You have that pressure. Yeah.
Right. And then also you got to think of what is extracurricular to you and what is curricular. So to us, a sport is actually curricular.
Sure.
For us, it's a major thing, especially for my son. That's where his passion lies. He gets his athletic need out. But reading for him is not a high value. So I see him reading the Guinness Book of World Records at bed at night. We're good.
Yep.
You know? So it's just figuring out maybe even what you value for each child.
Sure.
Because of what they value.
Exactly.
And then going, looking at that. And he had to choose this time between flag football and potentially Little League starting back up again.
Right.
I say, because they'll overlap, but you have to choose. And he's like, oh, I'm so excited about flag football. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, because he did it one other year. He did it last fall, and he loved it.
Right.
So, and it's only 7 weeks. And so that's what I love, too, is it's not a big commitment.
Yeah. I thought he was ready for going back to
He
baseball.
was.
Yeah.
That's why we're like, well, you won't be able to do it because they overlap by like a month. And we're not going to do both. No. So that is our personal edit, saying you can choose one or the other.
Right.
So that's a homeschool edit.
Yeah.
And then also working together in the home with hands. So he was saying what a value that is, not just for them as a family, but really just for people in general.
Right. For us, teaches us patience.
Right. Yeah. Right. And he was talking about how don't shoo the kids away. Just know it will take you longer, but it's good. And he actually, parents aren't at all, this is what he says, many parents aren't at all accustomed to being patient and present for their kids anymore. If only because they're simply not given the opportunity to be patient and present. Jobs get in the way, school gets in the way, after school activities get in the way. But if you're going to work on a home project together, right? You know, like yesterday and today, my husband and son were filling in the cracks of our driveway, and my son said that was so fun. And he was out there with him in the heat for hours. Yeah. And he learned a skill, something my husband's learning in the moment that he's doing it as well. They're learning it at the same time.
That's cute.
And so that's special. So, but if you don't have a driveway, there's also other things you can do. You can make Christmas gifts together. Totally. You can make tile coasters, and then they can learn tiling or mosaic. You know, just little projects like that. You can ask your child. You can put them in charge of 1 day a week of meals for dinner. Right. And you can put them in charge of the grocery shopping list. You know, and help them work through that. They can help you hang pictures. They can help you set the table. You can do fancy Fridays for meals, right? And so they can help you set up the fancy dishes and help decide the menu. And then if you have land, we have a friend who has a number of acres. They let their son, who's only 9 years old, start weed whacking when he was like 6 or 7. Now he's bought 3 weed whackers with his own money. And he's trying to do a business with it. And he loves it. And so if you do have land, letting them help you with one activity or asking them to help you with one activity may open up this whole new world to them that they love. And they can help you plant a garden. Even if you have a patio, they can help you put some soil and plant some herbs or whatever. You know, there's always something you can do and have them help you with, or take care of animals. He talks a lot about taking care of animals. And my daughter's in charge of the hermit crabs. I never know if they're alive or not. But every once in a time, I hear them clicking around. I'm like, all right, she's taking care of them, I guess.
Just this morning we were making pancakes, and my little guy got to help me mix the batter and pour it, and he was so excited because he hasn't really shown an interest in wanting to do it before, and so I haven't really asked him to because it is inconvenient.
It is, it's
definitely something I'm not natural at is allowing somebody to be involved, which would slow me down.
Right.
So
it's not efficient.
Have to work
it's
on.
Not efficient.
Yeah, it's not, but it's so valuable to them. And then it's relationship building. So he had so much fun being able to do it, and
well, there's that quote we put on our Instagram. If people follow our Instagram, they'll get all these wonderful quotes. It says, like all of us, children just want to be needed. It's our job to make sure they actually are. So just saying, I need your help. I was planting some potted plants yesterday, and I couldn't lift up the bag without the pot moving. So I had my 6-year-old come and hold the pot in place. Right. And when she started to let go, I was like, no, I really need you. I need you to hold that in place.
It wasn't a fake job.
I'm going to tip over. I need it to rest, and, And then she was there for however long I needed her.
Right.
It's really precious and sweet. And those things make them feel loved and validated in their, and just their being as a human being.
And valuable as a member of the family.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Definitely. Okay. Oh, I have another quote here.
Okay.
And it goes there's another part too, and I think it's that chores and our assumption of responsibility in a world that can sometimes feel devoid of such a thing. In a sense, chores are homage to the animals and crops under our care, the fulfillment of a silent promise not only to them but to ourselves. It's a promise not to take anything for granted, and that we won't forget, for this one day at least, that we are merely a part of something bigger than we can even imagine.
Yeah, I love that. And then just above that, he says, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as inconveniences. And I like that one too.
Totally.
Yeah. I like that.
And actually, I think that's the name of the chapter. The downside of convenience.
Sure. Yeah.
So the convenience of shooing your
what we
kids
lose.
away.
Yeah.
And that was good. I
And
thought that
then-
was a really
So in that subchapter, the practice,
Mm-hmm.
so he does these little subchapters after each chapter. He talks about, he says, I cannot overstate our desire for our sons to know a similar sense of being part of something larger than themselves, to understand their dependence on and role within the cycles and rhythms that define the laws of nature. And I thought that was really valuable. And he talks about his own personal worldview as well, which I think is very interesting because, with my Christian worldview, what I'm trying to teach my children is that we know exactly what their role is. Their role as a child of God is very important. And from their very first day, they are valued, they are loved, and they have an important part to play, their role as, a responsibility to serve others, to serve their Lord, to serve their country or to protect the planet. They have all of these roles that they were given at birth. Is what I believe.
That. Me too, sister.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And actually just not being coddled all the time and not being just served to instead of being involved. Like, that makes such a big difference in, like you said, their value as a person.
Exactly.
Not that they always want to do it, but that is a great way to teach a child to do something they don't want to do without it being like, you're going to draw this picture about your book that you read. Instead, it's like, come help me mow the lawn,
Right. There's a lot of value in our
pull some
day-to-day.
weeds with me. Yeah. All right, so that's chapter 7.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a doozy.
I think that's the biggest one.
It is. The rest are a lot
get through
smaller.
these,
Yeah. So chapter 8, the work of the world. I have as my theme that was basically intimate or special time, one-on-one, and love of laboring together.
Yeah. I called it observing the overlooked work. So for the things that we don't think about, we'll get there, but he talks about the fact that we don't think about what the cows eat. Yeah. We just drink the milk in our coffee or in our cereal, but we don't think about the process of feeding the cows and tending to them and all of this intense work that's done every day for these cows.
Right.
For my one little, glass of milk every day.
It's crazy. Yeah. Someone got up at like 5 a.m.
Yeah.
At the butt crack of dawn.
Yep.
And did a load of work.
Yeah.
And he was even saying how his neighbor, he looks across the way and his neighbor is, I won't use the expletive, but is scooping up poop.
Right. Yeah.
And says, I love my life. And he really does, getting down and dirty in the love of laboring.
Yes. So he talks about, it kind of extends from chapter 7, but he talks about how his kids having so much time together, you eventually see the fruits of your work in them as well, and these moments of kindness happen. And I just know, even watching that in my own 2 children, which, there's points in your life where you're like, are they ever going to be nice to each other? Are they ever going to spontaneously be kind?
Yeah.
And then that moment happens and you're like, wow, like it's one of the best moments. It's one of the biggest gifts as a parent.
Oh yeah. Even just, my 6-year-old's probably the best at sharing.
Yeah.
So if she sees someone sad, one of her siblings is sad because she got something they didn't, she gives it to them, and it's just so sweet and so precious, that bond and that caring.
Right. That they love each other outside of yourself.
Right.
You know, sometimes I forget how different they are, that they're independent of me.
That's true. Not just they're not an extension.
They're not an extension. Yeah, they're independent of me, and they're going to have their own relationship that I'm just not a part of.
Right. Yeah.
And so when those moments happen outside of me, it's amazing to see.
Oh yeah, I remember my son, he was 4 and he only started talking when he was really about 3. So when he was 4, he says to my 2-year-old daughter, he says, Ruby, let's go in the other room so mommy doesn't have to listen to us. Like, he didn't want us to hear what he wanted to say. And it was so funny. His speech therapist saw that on Facebook and was just like, oh my goodness, Micah, you know, it was so fun for her to see such growth and development. But yeah, it's like, they don't want me to know about their little conversations, and it's really sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so he talked about just living life together and the fun and satisfaction they can have in doing a chore together and not needing to impart information all the time.
Right.
So that's my guilt. Oh my goodness. I do that with you. I do that with all my friends even. Like, we'll be talking about something and be like, well, and that's why, blah, blah. You know, I'm always in teaching mode, and my whole family is kind of that way.
Sure.
And so how much harder even than with my kids to ever escape that, right? So I like that he said, you know, there was his son said, oh, I had fun doing that.
Right.
And he wanted to say, you mean you got great satisfaction? But he didn't. He just said, that was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I liked that, just like laboring together, doing life together. That's enough of a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are teachable moments to come in as well, but just to just guard your special time together.
Exactly. Yeah. And there'll be a pertinent time to be able to explain the difference between satisfaction and fun, but maybe not to your 7 or 8-year-old. You know, when they are describing hard work as fun, let them have it.
Yeah.
That's great that they think that.
Totally.
And, he talks about the value of extricating yourself from these big moments with them, and I found that to be like a great thing. You know, like, how often do we insert ourselves?
Oh, totally. I mean, me, totally.
And and then he was talking. He used the specific example of one of his sons having a speech impediment or a speech difference. You know, like at first just with his R's.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was so cute because what he was really saying was that even the kids are constantly changing. And so even observing their own work that they do within themselves can be so enlightening to us.
Right.
You know, so even when we aren't teaching, they're still learning and growing and changing. And it's just fascinating.
And they will do less eye rolling, because he mentioned that. He's like, no wonder kids do so much eye rolling, because we're always inserting ourselves into their learning process.
Right.
And I thought that was just such a really profound point, that most of us are like, no eye rolling.
Right.
But it's like, oh, wait, but what am I doing?
We can't even let them have their own thoughts.
Yeah. No, you can't be annoyed that I inserted myself into your learning experience and reinterpreted it for you. Right. You know, so he also talked about the importance of having individual time with each child. Yeah. And so, you know, we've done that a lot. We've done daddy-daughter dates, and mostly daddy-daughter dates and daddy-son dates, because I'm with my kids all the time.
Right.
And then I started to get, not jealous, but just like FOMO about, I could be doing my own one-on-one time. Yeah. You know? So when COVID hit, you know, the previous Christmas, my husband had taken my daughter to Nutcracker. Mm-hmm. So we usually do these dates on a big scale. It's all day. You ride the train somewhere. You go shopping together. It's a whole, all the places they want to eat at and dessert places and stuff. But COVID hit. So I was like, oh, well, we can have a happy hour.
Yes.
So we put it on our blog called Fill Your Cup with Happy Hour, I think. A happy hour or something like that. And you can check it out on our blog. But just talking about how just even an hour and just rotate through the kids. Even when you're home all day with them and the spouse isn't there to help with the other kids, if they're old enough, you could literally say, okay, this is my hour with this child. And like they've, one of them took me through her own art lesson. And another one wanted to go for a hike. Another one wanted to play video games. And once they all heard that, now it's like just video game. They're like, "Will you play the video game?"
That was an option.
I know, yeah. So now it's like, okay, how about no digital stuff? And, I'll read to you, or, you can push them in the swings if you have a swing in the backyard. And the other day I did it where I didn't feel like getting out of bed. So I called one of the kids in. I said, how about we do our own special cuddle time?
Yeah.
And so the other two just played games or whatever. And so I probably spent a half an hour with each child, cuddling with them in bed, talking about whatever. Yeah. And my daughter was like, what should we chat about? And it was just so cute.
That's so
and
cute.
then they would check in, is it my turn yet? Is it my turn yet?
So they all wanted to.
Yeah. And then
really
they just
sweet.
rotated through, and it was really great. And hugging, a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old all still wanted to be cuddled in my bed under the covers.
Love it.
Well, I got to stay in bed till like 10 o'clock. So it was great. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I really liked that. And it just kind of reconfirmed, I need to do more of that. Yeah. Like he mentioned getting to see like their humor change and these different things about them change that you don't always notice when you're together as a family.
Exactly. He continues talking about that even in letting them be, because that's the little sub-chapter here after chapter 8. And he's talking about his kids going out and doing this project out in their wilderness. And they each come in at different points during the day with injuries, but they don't want dad to bother them. They don't want to be asked, they just want to go and put the bandage on and get back out there. So you presume it's nothing serious.
Right.
But just the fact that they're independent and so excited about what they're doing that they just want to get back to it. And he talks about that. He talks about the fact that they already have taught their sons how to, provide first aid for themselves.
Right.
And so they knew what to do. They knew how to clean it and bandage it and move on. And it's just, it's just so interesting. And I realized it was just this year, now that my daughter is 8, this is the first time I've watched her go and put a Band-Aid on something of her own without asking. Yeah, it was like a big deal to me. This was my child who, just a scraped knee would mean we're leaving the park like it's all done.
Aww.
The day is done, and so there was like a year where I was like anxious all the time that if she got hurt, like we're all done. And it was just hard to figure out how to help her through that. But really, I think she just had to come to terms with, these injuries can be just minor,
right?
And they don't have to upset her whole day, but she had to learn that.
Well, my youngest, starting about when she was about 1 or 1.5 years old, when she would get a boo-boo, any kind, her mouth would open, her head would go back, and it would be a silent scream, basically.
Oh, no.
And she would stiffen and literally fall down like a board and bang her head on whatever. So even at Little League one time, since my son's she did that, and everybody was like, "Oh, is she okay?" We're like, "I know, it's insane to look at. It's pretty crazy." And every once in a while, I could catch her before she did it. But the taller she got, the more bang it went.
Yeah,
because she doesn't slow fall. It was literally stiff as a board. I'm like,
I don't know if I've ever heard this story.
I know. I cannot believe she didn't crack her head open. So now what she'll do is she'll just put her head back.
Right.
And then you'll hear the cry, and she doesn't collapse, but oh my goodness, the drama.
Right.
But, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they let them have so much free time to explore. And I'm sure sometimes they got boo-boos when they were really far away from the house with no one to help them, and they just had to figure it out.
Right.
So, that's a hard balance, because I'm not going to let my kid go far enough where they could get taken.
Right.
So at a playground, that always made me very nervous. So we didn't go to playgrounds very often, because I wasn't worried about the playground structure. I was worried about who is in the peripheral that I cannot see.
To be fair, we live in urban, suburban areas. We're not in rural Vermont on the border of Canada here.
And see, and that's the kind of thing too to remember about what he's saying. His values. Well, he put himself in a place where he can exercise those values, and not everyone can do that. It depends on the job.
Right.
It also depends on your emotional barriers. Everyone may want to have a farmstead. We all follow those Instagram people who have that, but to go and do it is a whole nother thing. To save up enough money is a whole nother thing.
It's waking up at 5:30 every day, every day of the year. There's no breaks.
So so his values are definitely in line with how he lives.
Sure.
And makes it easier to value free play because they have the world to go do it.
Right.
And I can value free play here where I have a bunch of rattlesnakes, but I'm not going to let my 2-year-old go out and free play where there's rattlesnakes.
Right.
But if I was somewhere in, I don't know, where there's no rattlesnakes, Wyoming maybe I would let her go out a little bit more, you know. So there's, we have a lot more boundaries and constraints than he might have.
Right.
So this book, after chapter 8, I just wrote in my notes that this reminds me of the book called Educated by Tara Westover, or Tara Westover. And it's just, they both have a similar situation in that they're out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. And they're both survivalists. But, you know, one is, and they're both homeschooling.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And basically unskilling, you know, Westover in the book Educated, she is, I think they're in like a scrap metal junkyard or something, like,
whoa.
And so she has to go digging for scrap metal and has really no education.
Yeah.
And never seen a doctor or nurse, and her mom just does the oils and is a midwife and things like that. But this guy does it in the way that's more typical. So a lot of people read Educated, and there's articles written now against homeschooling because of this. Well, that wasn't homeschooling. That was just neglect. So it was just interesting when that book came to my mind. I'm like, well, this is what it should have looked like.
Right.
You know, this is what
the contrast,
Tara Westover could have had. But because of some decisions and different values that her parents had, she literally did have to educate herself completely on her own.
Right.
You know, almost against her parents' wishes, basically.
Right.
So anyway, so if you're tempted to read either Educated or Homegrown, I would say go with Homegrown.
Yes.
It will continue to enhance and enrich your viewpoint of homeschooling and unschooling, whereas Educated would possibly turn you against it. I don't know.
Right.
But but it was just fun to juxtapose those two.
Yeah.
So should we go to chapter 9?
Yes.
All right. Chapter 9 is called
Risk and Responsibility.
Okay. What'd you have for your theme for that?
You know, I didn't even really write a theme for this one because I felt like it was basically a continuation of chapter 8. And then it's just looking more at involving what the involving the children look like.
Yeah.
And the balance of risk and responsibility.
Well, and I mean, the theme is basically the chapter title, right?
Right.
And it's the transforming power of responsibility. You know, when he talks about how his kids have had knives since they were 4.
Right.
But that's not the developmental age to give a 4-year-old a knife. But developmental age doesn't matter when you're not going by that. You're going by life, and giving them the skills they need as they go through life.
And they weren't just handed a knife. You know, they've been watching their parents use knives in their everyday work. You know, they weren't just a fun novelty. The knives were tools, and they'd been observing that work for years. And they had limitations on those tools.
Yeah, they had to use it in front of them and stuff. And here's the thing about that. And also, he said they started driving tractors at like age 8 or 9 or something. He said, what happened though is when you let your child have responsibility and you make a big deal about it, they actually, you can see the change even in their eyes. Like he could see his son's eyes change when he gave him
that responsibility.
Yeah, when he gave him the knife. They knew the weight of it. So if you're communicating that, and he had a great quote about responsibility. Going back to, in our family, responsibility doesn't have birthdays.
Right.
You know, the exposure happens when they're ready for it. It doesn't matter how old they are. But the responsibility granted transformed our son, which is, okay, so this is what I love. When you take responsibility from a child, he becomes less responsible. And as he becomes less responsible, he is granted less and less responsibility.
Yeah.
So still talking about the theme, like just seeing the transforming, the transforming power of responsibility can lead to more responsibility.
Yeah.
When I had number 3, No, actually, when I had number 2, the first one was not even 2 years old. And he came and visited her in the hospital, and he knew it was a big moment, and he knew to be gentle. And then at home, he was always gentle. Like, you know, think of a 22-monther, you know.
Yeah, that's just his soul, though.
Yeah, that's true. But he was just like, he took on that responsibility.
Yeah.
And then my number 3, she knows to be gentle, but she's 6 and she's still,
right,
because she hasn't had that responsibility. You know what I mean? She hasn't had the responsibility of making sure she doesn't smother a child when she's 22 months old.
Right.
And I remember when I'd take a shower, I'd be like, oh, what's going to happen to the newborn with my not even 2-year-old?
Right.
And she was always fine, you know. But, and when I had number 3, I put the 4-year-old, so now he's 4, in charge of feeding the 2-year-old. I put all the food at the right level in the fridge. She's hungry while I'm nursing, because I would nurse for hours, you know, when you first bring home the baby. And he handled her string cheese, her yogurt, get her the spoon, throw the things away, get her the napkin. And then he knew the nursing bin that he would go into and open it up, and they'd go through and find something and then put everything back. And that's, you know, that responsibility made him a little more responsible, you know, than someone who doesn't have a younger sibling.
Right.
So that was just a real example in my own life.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And the bonds form because of responsibility and mutual need. And the shared experiences and contribution that they give each other. It's a mutual need. They talked about hay
baling?
Yeah, hay baling together. And
the square bales.
Yeah, they're bound by mutual need. And the fact that they depend on each other really binds them.
Yep.
Do you have anything else for that?
Yeah. Well, it moves on a tiny bit, but he was talking about how, you know, when you know to give kids more responsibility, and his boys kind of taking on the driving of the tractor that pulls the wagon that's full of hay. And he says this, he says, "My children have not yet arrived at the conquering age, when the default assumption is that such things can be bent to their will." You know, so they still were young enough when they were given these responsibilities that some things seemed intimidating. You know, the thought of them someday taking over the hay baling job.
Oh, right.
The whole job was intimidating. They're like, I don't know that I could ever do that. I just learned to drive the wagon.
Right.
You know, but they hadn't reached the conquering age. And I thought that was such a unique thing. You know, I've not heard of that before, that there's a developmental stage that they feel more like conquerors. Like, but I can imagine that. You know, I remember becoming a young adult, being 14, 15, 16, and thinking, oh, I can do that. You know, that thing that I used to think was impossible, you know, like driving a car.
Right.
I can do that.
Oh, totally.
I got that.
Yeah.
You know, but at 12 years old or 10 years old, the thought of driving a car seemed like the craziest thing. Like, you can't.
Right.
That's a crazy amount of responsibility. You can't give that to me.
Right. I feel like my son develops that, especially in his sports. You know, in the very beginning, he was timid. I had to drag him from base to base. And just to show him how it would work. And he wouldn't let anyone throw the ball to him except me.
Right.
So, you know, that was funny. And I'm pregnant with number 3 at this point. And now it's like, oh, he's telling people what to watch for. He's out. He's conquered it. Like, he's out there and he's team captain, you know.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to watch as a parent to see them do that. I have some takeaways for chapter 9. Okay. So one of the things that started me to think a little bit more about it are, what are some responsibilities we can give our children?
Oh, sure.
Because we're not going to go give them the responsibility of building a shed.
Yeah,
you know,
probably not.
But they can plan the grocery list for the week, like I mentioned, with a budget. So you say you have $200 or whatever your budget is, plan a grocery list for the week with healthy food, you know, and see what they do and try and live on it for that week.
Right.
And see.
Execute it.
Yeah. Execute it. Good. Yeah. And then learning to start a fire. You know, a 10-year-old can start a fire.
Sure.
Making their own breakfast and lunch. My kids do that because I'm still in bed in the morning. But, and then lunch, you know, like today we got home from church. They were hungry. They didn't even tell me they were hungry. All of a sudden they're in the fridge. They're making their own quesadilla.
Yeah.
You know, so we have things available for them to have independence and take responsibility for. Let them wander the trees with walkie-talkies when you're camping.
Yep.
You know, let them chop the veggies with the knives. And then Boy Scouts, we didn't do Scouts because that that was, again, one of our homeschool edits. I really wanted to, but since we have 2 girls, I didn't want to pull the husband and son away from the family as often as that would be.
Yeah, it's a big commitment.
Yeah, and so, I've done my own thing with badges and things like that. But what I've noticed with my nephews who are now in college and senior in high school is when they were like 7 or 8, they could fillet a fish.
Yep.
They could tie every knot.
Yep.
They carried knives in their backpacks, and one got caught at school, and it was a 0 tolerance school.
Oh no!
But he didn't even think of it because you just always have a knife with you.
It's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not a weapon, a tool.
The teacher let it go, thankfully. Because my sister, she happened to be on campus that day, like helping out. So she told her. So she was. But yeah, it's it was just really cool the things that they got to learn because they did scouting and the responsibility they took on. And by the time they're 14, they're doing 80-mile hiking trips, packing their own bags, carrying their own bags, going from Lake Tahoe to Mammoth. It's incredible. Yeah. So there's so many things we can do to give, and you could even sit down and brainstorm together. What responsibilities do you want to have?
Right.
You can sit down with the spouse or even with friends, have a girls' night and say, what are some things that you've given your kids responsibility for? And just see what they've done. And then you can gauge your own child and say, like my husband tried to have the kids start weed whacking.
Right.
Because I think it was because I said, oh, their other friend is weed whacking. He's like, oh yeah, why not? And maybe not the 6-year-old, but the older 2, he was going to have them do it. So it ended up breaking right in that moment. So maybe that was providence,
case.
Yeah. But it was just a lot of nuggets from these 3 chapters. Some of the chapters we've really just, flipped through, but I feel like these 3, especially chapter 7, was a really
I really enjoyed the read.
Yeah. All right, so let's do our joys.
Okay. Well, I have finished my dance course. So a few weeks ago I shared as one of my scoops that I was taking a professional development course, and it was my social emotional learning for dance education. And I had a blast taking the class. It inspired a lot of thought and not a lot of huge additions to my current curriculum, but just like a slight nuance in how I think of things, or not being afraid to shy away from or being afraid to address social emotional issues when they arrive.
Cool.
Yeah, and just being able to name them and be able to discuss them. So I had a blast and I passed with distinction. And so it always feels good.
We should do a whole podcast about that. I'd love to learn what you learned.
I could organize that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, mine is, I've mentioned this before, but the bond between my younger 2 girls is growing, finally. So they did a little birthday party for one of the 6-year-old, the youngest stuffed animal. She's been doing. My oldest was like, I'm not going to do a birthday party every day, but my 2 daughters, we sing happy birthday, and
that's really cute.
And she's more seeking her out, the 8-year-old, which is nice. So normally it's the older 2 are together, but now the sisters are really starting to form a friendship, and there's more kindness there and thoughtfulness and caring and sharing. So Care Bear stare. But so that just brought me joy seeing that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Grow just as I expected, just as I knew like would happen, and just to wait for it. I knew to wait for it, and now seeing it starting to develop is really great.
Awesome. So we have, at the end of November, we'll have our last 2 chapters of Homegrown, and then the epilogue and the notes to the reader and everything. So we're excited for that last little leg of our book, and then we will announce then the book for our spring.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever gotten so much out of a book.
Yeah, because this method is really valuable to me. I'm gaining a lot, a lot more in-depth discussion and conversation than if I just read it by myself.
Oh, totally. And even when you just do one book club meeting, about a whole book, which is what I'm used to,
you'd lose so much.
There's no way. I mean, we've talked about this book now for a total of 3 hours, and in a book club, normally you talk about it for an hour and a half.
Right.
So, and we still have a whole nother quarter to go. Yeah. And so it's really awesome spreading it out and really diving in.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so that's Homegrown.